Steve Wernick, Rabbi Wernick, one of the rabbis at Beth Tzedec Congregation, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. We're really happy to welcome you to this week's edition of Conversations Over Coffee, where we really just chat with interesting people about our lives and the ups and downs, challenges and opportunities of living in this moment of history. This morning's guest is Naomi Kramer. Naomi is not only a member of the board of Beth Tzedec, but in her professional life, she is the director of operational excellence. Not just of operations, but operational excellence. That means if it's not excellent, she's not responsible for it. she's also a wife and a mother, and like the rest of us, just trying to figure out how we make meaning and challenge all the different responsibilities taking place at one time. And I should say that she's also co-chair of our family engagement committee. So our conversation today is going to be basically kids, families, pandemic, work, synagogue, school, summer. I maybe Naomi, you can pan the camera a little bit to the room, so you can, I don't know if she wants to show.
No, thanks. we on purpose have this angle that we point our camera up a little bit, so that way nobody ever really sees the floor. So,
so there you have it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So Naomi, let's start. Tell us a little bit about you and your family. Who are the people in your family?
So my partner, my husband, is Miles Kramer, and he works for the University of Toronto. He works as the director of corporate partnerships. And so the quick explanation for that is he takes professors who are doing really interesting research, and he finds companies who want to fund that research. And then I have 3 children, Asher, who is 8, Oren, who is almost 5, and Ayla, who is 2. She just turned 2. And Asher and Oren go to school at Robbins Hebrew Academy, which I think most people know is also housed in Beth Tzedec. So we're in the building quite often, not only, well, when the building's open, not only during the week, but also obviously for holidays and on Shabbat. And so that's who I have in my immediate house. We have 1 cat. And I always consider getting a dog, but probably now is not the best
time. What are the kids doing for the summer?
It's a great question. So originally, and I'm sure all parents can confirm this, we did the competitive get them into the camp you want moment where you're logging in and you're trying to get them into all the camps that you want. And we got them into some really great camps, which have all been canceled. So they are home with us. Asher is signed up for what's called Couch Camp through the University of Toronto for the staff there. Their kids could take a camp on the couch. That started this week, so I'll have to let you know more about it after I find out. They're doing ukulele lessons, some language classes, but mostly really they're just home with us, and trying to balance having the kids home and also both of us working full time has been sort of interesting. Ayla, the youngest one, was never in camp. She would have normally been in daycare, but her daycare's been closed since March. So she's also home with us. So we have all 3 kids with us while we both attempt to work full time from home.
Do you try to stagger the work hours at least? So somebody on duty?
Yeah. So during the rest of the school year, what was great was that RHA had the kids in Zoom classes all day. So we were really blessed that way. I know not all schools could really handle something like that. So the boys at least were occupied. And then we were sort of able to balance Ayla with, I would just take out a new bin of toys, and not new toys, just rotated toys every day. So she'd be a bit distracted. And then we'd sort of take turns who was taking care of the children in that moment. If we had meetings, we have a very extensive Google Calendar, so that way we don't have meetings where we have to be paying attention fully at the same time. And if you ask anybody that I work with or that Elon works with, our kids have all made appearances in our meetings often. So there's that balance. And I have to say that we're quite lucky because we have a backyard. It's not big. It's a Toronto backyard, but it's at least a space where we can send the kids outside, especially the older ones. And they don't have to be as supervised, and they can let out all of their energy. And I think we're really lucky that way.
What have you found to be the most difficult element of the juggling?
I would say feeling like we're being successful at any one thing or all of them. It feels like how can you be successful at everything at the same time? So something's got to give. So if one of us is really focused on work, then inevitably something happens with the kids where we then need to pull ourselves away, maintaining focus. So I was just telling Elon the other day that I had some focused work to do, but it feels like the minute that you get focused, then somebody needs, I don't know, a snack, water, something. And so then you pull yourself out to attend to their needs. And then you have to remind yourself, what was I doing again? So I think, trying to do a good job at everything that you want to do a good job at. I mean, in the best of circumstances is challenging, but this is in particular very, very difficult. And of course, we all want to do a good job at whatever we're doing, whether it's parenting or working or whatever. And so trying to find that way to feel like you're successful, to feel good about your day at the end of the day has been tremendously difficult. And then to just carve out a little bit of time for yourself, which again, under the best of circumstances is challenging. But in this situation, you know, you're with kids and with each other all the time. Even, you try and go to the washroom by yourself. That doesn't always happen. And so sometimes just having that moment to yourself is, if you can find it, is like such a blessing. And so um, I just think this balance is so tricky. But then on top of that, I think trying to be empathetic for other people's situations. So trying to remember that we're lucky. I was talking to a colleague the other day, and she is single and living on her own. And she said to me that she hasn't been hugged since mid-March. And so whenever I'm in that moment where I'm like, okay, I just need a little bit of space or whatever it is, I try and remind myself how truly blessed I am, because, you know, the grass always seems greener, I'd suppose. And it's not always greener, I think.
So one of the key things for resiliency that we've been learning, certainly during this, is the importance of gratitude and of maintaining perspective. So what are the silver linings in all of this, and in the midst of all those challenges that you've had, that have helped you to maintain that perspective? Not just talking to colleagues and understanding that the grass is always greener on the other side, it seems, but when your grass isn't so bad either.
Yeah.
But what else have you done in order to not only for yourself but also for the kids? I mean, what's been what have been the silver linings, the things for which you're actually grateful to have this time like this?
So a few things. First of all, I think I feel grateful that I get to spend so much time with my family all the time, because I'm originally from the States, and so my extended family is mostly in the New York City area. And so I think I'm even more appreciative of the fact that I have my immediate family all under one roof, and my in-laws not so far away. We have a very good relationship. I suppose that could be something that people aren't grateful for, but I am very grateful for my extended family here. But on top of that, I've gotten to see Ayla in particular, the youngest one. She's learned so much over the past little while, which I think would have happened anyways. But I got to witness it, which, with the boys, they were already in childcare, and so I didn't get to see all of this type of development. And so I'm really grateful for that. Um, I've gotten to spend more time with both Asher and Oren. So Oren and I often will make challah together on Fridays. For anyone who ever follows me on Facebook or Instagram, I make challah every week, and it's something that I've always loved doing, but never had the time. And so I'm grateful for the time to do that, because for anybody who makes challah, it's actually more waiting for it to rise. So if you're at work, you can't really like have challah rising while you're at work, but when you're at home, you can, take 20 minutes, put up the dough, let it rise, and then take another half an hour or whatever and braid it or whatever you're going to do, and then let it rise and then throw it in the oven. And so I'm really grateful for that time, because I really, really love baking. It's a great creative outlet for me, and it really helps me sort of stay sane. And it's kind of been an interesting challenge and a fun challenge to try and figure out this Tetris of a schedule with Elon, with my, my partner, my husband. And it just, I think when you're sort of bottled up in this high stress situation, it could go either way. Like, things could be more stressful and you could fight more and whatever. But luckily, this really reaffirmed for me that there's probably nobody that I'd rather be locked up with than Elon. And just the way that he's so supportive of me, and I hope that I'm so supportive of him in careers and in parenting and whatever. Like right now, I don't know if you can hear in the background, I certainly hear some yelling, but he's doing his best to try and keep people quiet, so that way mostly you hear me and less so them. And so that's been really, really sort of a blessing. But the other thing is, we started Zooming with family members more often. And while we'd all rather be together and hugging and spending time together, what's kind of cool about it is geography doesn't limit you. So my grandmother just turned 90 on Friday, and we had this big Zoom birthday party for her. And she's by far one of my favorite people on the planet. And so for me to be so far away from her was really, really tough. But at least we got to see her in this Zoom capacity. And what's very cool is all these people from across the country and across the world were able to be there, who, we were planning this big party for her. She's on Long Island, and we were going to be down on Long Island at this time. And I would have been there and it would have been fabulous, but not everybody who was at our Zoom party probably could have made it to this particular, event. And so that was sort of a blessing in disguise. And I just always try to stay as positive as possible. So I feel like I have lots of things to be grateful for. But those, I think, are the main ones, is, family and being able to spend time together. I'm really grateful for this 10-person bubble, because now I'm getting to spend more time with my in-laws and getting to see my children play with their cousin has been really fantastic as well.
And no, for us as well, it's like I'm also from the States, as you know, and I have a daughter in Israel. My father and his wife are in New York. I have another sister in Philadelphia, another sister in Maryland, and we started not only, like during the week, and like when things were like non-COVID, we would talk whenever we wanted to talk. We just pick up the phone and call, but it was always like, one way kind of thing. It was me to my dad, me with my sister with my daughter, and so forth. But my dad actually suggested, especially since my daughter was like in Israel and she had to isolate and she was really by herself, we now have, it's like we've scheduled it. And so it's once a week. Everybody knows when it is. We all get on, and it's just the family Zoom. It turned out to be something really lovely that I don't think would have happened necessarily without the virus. And just all of us taking that time for a half hour, an hour every week to get online and see each other's face and chit chat. Turned out to be good. I do have to ask you though, for my wife. I mean, I think she asked you herself, but how do you get your challah, especially when you do the colors for like Pride Month and so forth? How do you get the color so vibrant with your challah? You're muted.
Hi. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's one of the interesting parts about now, is you're very reliant on technology, and when it doesn't work, it can certainly be.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Did you hear the question?
I didn't.
So I was just asking about the challah. That I know that when you made challah for Pride Shabbat, the colors are very vibrant, and my wife wanted to know, how did you get them so vibrant?
So, good question. I used food coloring gels, and I used a lot of color. So certainly these challahs were not sort of chemical free, if you will. And I think I like to bake cakes a lot, so I have a lot of food coloring on hand, and so it's the gels. The gels really do it, and a lot of kneading, and I guess that's how I did it. But then once you bake it, it's not so vibrant on the outside. Once you cut into it, it's pretty exciting inside.
Are you seeing at the JCC? Are you seeing parents? I would imagine every parent of kids your age are in the same boat. Are you seeing anything specifically different than that? Anything noteworthy? Or are you able to learn some interesting, exciting things that other parents are doing to keep their kids occupied and to prepare them for dealing with this? Tell us a little bit what's happening in the JCC world.
So at the JCC, and I would say in lots of different parenting areas, you'll see the full gamut of parents who, the minute we open our childcare, are like, here you go, take them, to, parents who are nervous about sending their kids back out into the world. And I think probably that's the way a lot of people feel in general, worried about going back out, or the people who are just ready for this to all be over and just be out in the world. And so I would say, like, for sure, we're seeing that full range. But then on top of that, we did some great stuff where we formed Zoom meeting groups on the regular with the preschool and childcare children. And so that way, children were still getting to see their teachers. We had a great Facebook group where teachers were posting activities every day. And now we have a streaming service where teachers are posting there, whether it's stories or activities or whatever else it is. We have camp activities and things like that. So those are some of the well-received things that we've been doing at the JCC. And then just from parenting in general and just seeing what different people are doing backyard camps where as much as possible physical distancing is still observed. And of course, a lot of the research out there is saying that being outside is, if possible, is the best way to sort of mitigate risk with transmission. And so, we're seeing people who are bubbling with other families. Like, I have friends who don't have family in Toronto, and so they'll bubble with another family who has kids, their kids' ages. So that way people have, kids to play with. And I think boredom has become something that kids hadn't experienced in the past because we sort of were over programming them, I suppose. And now they're getting that experience where they're bored. I keep seeing all these memes of, welcome back to the 80s and even before, where kids actually had this opportunity to be bored and harness their inner creativity and stuff. And so I think everybody's sort of finding their own strategy as much as possible. There are certainly people who are struggling more than others. And some of that just has to do with their specific circumstances and, what childcare is available to them and everything. And so I've had friends who have opted for temporary layoffs so that way one of the parents can be sort of the sole breadwinner, if you will, while the other parent receives some sort of funding from the government but can take care of the kids. You'll find as many solutions out there as there are sort of creative ideas. And so I think by and large, people are really excited for things to go back to as normal as possible. And what that means, like, what is normal and what will normal be is the question, I think, on everybody's minds. Is it a totally new normal, or what will go back to the way it was?
What's happening right now in terms of preparing kids and families for long-term impacts? So as you said, in terms of normal, it's schools are making plans now to open. Some are opening, some might not be opening. There's concern about a second wave that might hit. As you know, at the synagogue, we're trying to figure out how we handle the holidays, which are going to be very different because even if we open, we're not going to be able to have everybody in at the same time. What strategies are families using? What strategies are you aware of from organizations like the JCC and other parenting groups, and suggestions for preparing kids and families for the fact that the reality is that that normal, as you said. I mean, what is normal? It's what does the new normal look like?
Yeah. Well, I'm finding in particular right now, a lot of people are suffering from Zoom or screen fatigue. And that's not just families. I'm finding like across the board that people are just not as interested in being on screens when they could be outside. And so it's been really hard to sort of figure out what will work well for families and for everybody during the high holidays when we can't actually be together. And in particular, I think we're seeing, because kids were on screens towards the end of school, that they're really parents are trying to pull their kids away. And in particular, in my family, we're very normally anti-screen. And if you had asked our kids, like, they don't know any of the TV shows, maybe we would watch a movie once a month or whatever, but really we were mostly not into screens. And we went from that to the boys each have their own tablet now, which has been totally a different scenario. But so for the summer, we've been really trying to pull them away from screens and not have them have that, screen addiction that we all seem to suffer from. And so we're noticing that sort of across the board, both at the JCC and I would say also at Beth Tzedec, families are just kind of wanting to take a step back, because I think for a lot of people, synagogue means community. And when you're sort of on the other side of a screen, you can't feel the community as strongly. It's really, really challenging to create that sense of community when you're not together. And so I think we do have a pretty big challenge for the high holidays, because we want to make people feel like they're part of us and part of our community. And so, I mean, this is so tricky. Like, as much as possible, if there were any outside things we could do to connect people, that would be great. With, I think with my family that we Zoom every week to meet up. Sometimes if you have a regular thing like that, that can be helpful. But I think we sort of need to be respectful of people wanting to take a bit of a step back and a bit of a break, and then realize that come September, when kids are back in school in some way, that maybe there'll be time then for us to sort of re-engage people on that level, trying to find ways to engage people like families together, because I think we're sort of, whether we want to or not, we're sort of forced together just with our immediate families for the time being. And so we've been doing a lot more things together where, family board game night and things like that. And so as much as possible, if we can sort of engage in some way that way. I certainly don't have really great solutions here, because I think that community component is what really brings people together. And that's sort of what we're missing, and it's hard to replace it.
Yeah, no, that's what keeps me up at night too. Um, as you know, we had, finally started hitting a stride with our family engagement strategies, and a lot of that was centered around food and meals and lowering that bar so more and more people can come. And lo and behold, they did come.
Yeah.
But now the challenge is that as people are feeling screened out and their kids are on screens all day long, how do you do meaningful engagement and yet still maintain uh, um, physical distance and smarts in terms of health and safety?
Yeah. Well, what's
Is there?
nice is, I was just going to say, what's nice is we have really creative staff at Beth Tzedec, and they're really thinking about those kinds of things. And the staff who work in particular with young families are, have young families themselves, or are just very familiar with the area. And so I'm really looking forward to working with them to see what they come up with. And it's going to be really exciting, I think, whatever it is, and the best that it can be considering the circumstances.
Well, we're certainly trying, that's for sure.
Yeah.
If there is one thing that you could point to, though, that you said, if Beth Tzedec did this for young families, that would be really awesome, what would that be?
Ooh, that's a great question. The problem is that each young family is a little bit different. So I think giving people options for where they can engage, because I think you often will say, come to people where they are, or something. I'm sure you say it better than I just said it. And so I think giving people options, so that way there isn't this pressure that they have to engage in a certain way. And so that way they can do what they're able to without sort of feeling bad that they're not able to do more. Because I think right now, a lot of us are feeling bad that we can't do it all. And so I think to just take some of the pressure off, but to give some of the support and options would be what comes to mind right away. But there's just no perfect answer really for everybody.
Do you have any final thoughts or comments, questions?
I mean, I think that this has been a truly trying time, and I think that ideally, we all have these visions of what should be happening in life in general. And what I always tell people when things don't work out the way they planned is it's important to sort of take a moment and think about what went a different way. Take a moment to mourn the loss of your expectation, so that way you can sort of move forward and make that change that you need to make in order to accept your present circumstances, and to be more forgiving of ourselves and more understanding that we're not going to get it perfect every time, and that really we do our best to survive and to thrive if possible. And so I think, just be a bit more forgiving of yourselves, and really take some time to yourself. Do something for yourself that will allow you to find yourself in sort of this chaos. So for me, I try and get up a lot of mornings and I go for a run because it gives me a moment to be outside and by myself and just start the day off in a way that I, how I feel comfortable and how I connect with sort of with the outside world. And so that's what works for me. And if it's possible for you to carve out some time for yourself to just have that moment, so that way you can, function for the rest of the day in the best way you can. And so that those are sort of the things that keep me going, is to, you know, just try to stay grounded as much as possible in whatever way that is.
I think a key element of what you said is to forgive ourselves. One of the greatest losses that we have here is the loss of expectation, and the loss of not only expectation, but we grieve the structures that we've created for how we understand the world. So there's that loss, and that leads to confusion and so forth and so on. So one has to forgive oneself, and one, I think, has to, and it's very hard, but one still has to, understand that this is an extreme circumstance. This is the definition of crisis. And in crisis, if we can remind ourselves of what values we care for, and then really look to focus in on those values and the decisions and actions that we take, and stay flexible.
Yes,
because
flexibility is key.
Flexibility is key, because you think something's happening and then something else changes and you have to pivot. So flexibility and forgiveness are the keys, I think, or two keys anyway, at least, to resiliency.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Naomi, for spending the time with us, for sharing a little bit about your own circumstance as a parent, as a partner, as a professional. The three Ps.
Yeah.
It's nice. It's nice. A nice iteration. Very alliterative. Mm-hmm. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Next week is my favorite Canadian holiday. It's Civil Service Day. Right? Canadians looked on the calendar and said, we don't have a long weekend in August, so let's give Monday off so there could be a long weekend in August. I guess in Toronto it's Simcoe Day, Lake Simcoe Day, probably, right? So it's my favorite Canadian holiday because it was just Canadians saying, "Hey, we need another long weekend." So we're going to take that day off ourselves, and we'll be back in 2 weeks for more conversations over coffee. We have a very, very exciting lineup of guests going into the High Holy Days, and we hope you'll join us for that. Mondays at 12:30. All the information of Beth Tzedec, all the activities that we're doing to keep people engaged, to keep people interested, and to provide support and community at this time are available on our website, www.beth-tzedec.org. Go visit us, join us for tefillot, for classes, for conversation, for community. That's it. Saying goodbye and Shavua Tov. Have a good week.
Thank you. Bye.